Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for attending Solution Focused Brief Therapy, a look beyond the techniques webinar featuring Elliot Connie. Elliot Connie is a psychotherapist that practices in Keller, Texas. He has worked with thousands of individuals, couples, and families applying the solution-focused approach to help them move their lives from the current problems towards their desired futures. He is the founder and director of the Solution Focused University, an online learning community that also conducts training to help professionals master the solution-focused approach in their work. He is recognized around the world speaking at national and international conferences and events in such places as the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, South Africa, Russia, Switzerland, England, Poland, Sweden, Denmark, Scotland, Holland, Canada, and Asia, training practitioners to apply solution-focused questions and techniques in their work. He has authored or co-authored 4 books, including The Art of Solution-Focused Therapy, Solutions Building in Couples Therapy, The Solution-Focused Marriage, and The Solution-Focused Brief Therapy with Clients Managing Trauma. I'm your host, Andrea Camp, sales manager with Therapy Sites, and we specialize in websites and online marketing solutions for mental health professionals. I'd like to personally welcome each and every one of you to this free educational event. During today's session, Elliot is going to ask some questions to you, and we'd love for you to participate. So if you want to take a look at your GoToWebinar control panel, on there you'll see a questions tab. Feel free to use this tab to answer any questions, ask any of your own questions, and make any comments that you may have along the way. After the webinar has been concluded, we do have a quick survey. We'd love to get your feedback. And now that we have all that taken care of, let's meet our presenter, Elliot. Take it away, Elliot.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. So a really quick note, and I only have them for an hour, right? We had done at the top of the hour?
Correct.
All right, I'm gonna go rapid fire. I'm gonna hit you guys with a whole lot of information in a short amount of time. So if you guys please pay attention, try to keep up, ask me any questions, all the things. And then also in this particular platform, I like to stay engaged with the audience when I do trainings. And in this particular platform, I can't see your chat. So I need my friend there that is hosting the events to be kind of my eyes and ears. So if you don't mind, just let me know what people are saying in the chat.
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Absolutely. Perfect.
As we typically do. So before I say anything else, I want to say welcome and thank you. The greatest gift that people can give to you is their time and attention. So the fact that you guys are willing to take time out of your day, the fact that you guys are willing to give me your attention, it is a gift I will never take for granted. So before I say anything else, I want to say thank you. One of the things that has always driven me nuts in my time in this field is whenever, it's hard to say, like, I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I say this, but whenever I would go to a training and I didn't feel as though I got anything from it, I would just go get like free CEUs or whatever, but I didn't feel like I got anything from it in terms of increasing my skills, my confidence, making me a better professional and or clinician. So I am really obsessed with making sure you guys get something from this training. I want to make sure you get something that actually is applicable to your work and makes a difference in the way that you do work with clients. So that's what I'm going to do here today. I'm going to give you every single thing that I can. Another thing I want to share with you is the only way I know how to show up and do this job is as myself. Most people don't believe me when I tell them this, but I am pretty introverted, and doing trainings and standing up on stages and even digital experiences like this are somewhat difficult for me. And the only way that I'm able to do it is to just like authentically be me and be who I am. So if I could have your permission just to not be a professional, hiding behind the shield of our degrees and our licenses, but just be like a regular human being, that would be a massive important thing to me, because that's the only way I know how to show up. So with that, now that you know that, welcome. Now, there are 3 things I want you guys to get from being at this training. The first one is how to work effectively using the how to work effectively using the solution focused approach with any client, regardless of the problem that brought them into therapy. Whenever I say that to people, they tend to, I mean, I've had people get like really angry with me for saying that. Like, there's no such thing as a cookie cutter approach, and no one thing works with all clients, and all that kind of stuff. That's actually not true. There is a lot of research that says the most important dynamic to whether or not the client accomplishes a positive goal from therapy is two things. Number one, the relationship between the client and the therapist. And I think that we misunderstand the word relationship, and we think the fit, right? When someone says the relationship between the client and therapist, we think, are they a good fit for one another? But that's not true. What they mean by relationship is trust between the client and therapist. Mostly, does the client trust that the therapist is doing a good job in their best interest? That allows them to be in a relationship with us. When we say the relationship between the client and therapist, we don't mean how well they fit together. We mean how well does the therapist convey to the client, excuse me, we mean how well does the therapist convey to the client that they're working with their best interest in mind. So that's number one. Number two is this idea of fidelity. So, how well is the therapist sticking to what they're trained to do? Somehow in our field, we got our minds kind of like wrapped around this idea that our job is to try to solve a client problem by matching a treatment to that problem. But that is kind of, I find that kind of thinking odd, because like if you think to the originators of our field and the people that created the therapies and theories that we operate from, you never once heard any of them say that. You never heard Sigmund Freud say, I do this unless the client has this problem, then I switch to this. Fidelity is one of the biggest contributors to whether the client achieves a positive outcome or not. So, whenever someone says you can't use like not no one thing works with all clients, that's actually not true. And then there's a third variable that makes it not true is no therapy is the same in each and every session because the client is different and the client brings resources and the client brings language, which makes the therapy different. So I want to overtly say one of the things we have to talk about is how do you use these therapies in this particular case for the purpose of today's training, solution focused brief therapy in a way that allows you to be successful with each and every client, regardless of the problem. Number two is solution focused brief therapy. It's a very strength based approach. And I hate using that phrase because I think it's kind of become like a catchphrase in our field. But it is very reliant upon the client's strengths and personal resources because those are the things that are going to be used to solve the problem. We are not here to solve the client's problem. I want to be very clear and overt about that. We are here to help the client get into a position where they can solve their own problem. So that is not our job. That is not our role. That is not our responsibility. We have to be able to access the client's strengths, personal resources to put ourselves in a position where we can help them to solve their own problem. And third, how to be confident in your work at all times. Most people in this field struggle with what we refer to as imposter syndrome, which is nothing more than we have less confidence in our work than we should. So we operate from this positionality of not having the confidence that our clients deserve and should, and that we should have in what we're doing. And I want to make sure that you have confidence in what you're doing and how you're doing it. So I want to check in really quick. If I'm able to accomplish these three things in an hour, which is a tall task, but if I'm able to accomplish these three things in an hour, how many of you would feel like this was a valuable use of your time? How many of you would feel like this was worthwhile for you to be here?
Just checking the question section right now. I do. Yes, yes, that would be awesome. That's a lot to cover.
It is a lot to cover, but I didn't come here not to work. Um, and then lastly, to one of the things I should say also to accomplish those things, I'm going to do a live question and answer later today. Um, or not later today, but later in the hour.
Right.
uh, I'm going to do a live question and answer later in the hour. So if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A, and then we're going to field your questions later. All right. But this is the tall task I have, and I'm up for it. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And then one more thing, if you stay to the end, the wonderful people at Therapy Sites are going to gift you with CEUs, and then they have another special gift for you regarding their services and what they do. So stay to the end. It'll be worthwhile. So my goal today, well, it says 90 minutes, 60 minutes. I want to instill supreme confidence and the belief in your solution focused skills as well as your client. I think sometimes we fear the problem or the referral problem, more than we believe in the client's ability to overcome. And once that happens, when you have more fear of the problem than you have confidence in the client, it is very hard to function clinically. So you've got to hold on to your client, to your ability to believe that your client can achieve regardless of what is going on for them. And if you want to be able to build a thriving therapy practice and shine in your role and serve more clients, like these are important things. And that's exactly what I want for you. So I'm just going to do a really quick introduction because some of you may not know who I am. Like she said, I'm the founder of an organization called the SFU, the Solution Focused Universe. And this is my leadership team. That is Cecil Walker, the lead trainer on our team. That is Dr. Adam Frower. He's the director of research and training for my organization. And on my other side, the woman you see there, that's Anna Francis. She's the CEO of our organization. I'm going to go through these slides really fast because we don't have a ton of time, but I just want to introduce myself and who I am and what I do. And it all started with myself and Dr. Adam Frower. We met way back in 2008, and we started meeting once a week because we were both really interested in solution-focused brief therapy. And we started meeting once a week, not knowing we'd one day be writing books or traveling the world lecturing or doing research projects together or whatever. We just wanted to learn this stuff and get much better at it. So that was way back. That was even before Skype. We would call each other once a week, and then eventually we would start meeting on Skype, then eventually on Zoom, and we have eventually gone on to do some really cool things. These days, our message is getting much further. I recently signed a television deal. I have a podcast deal with iHeartRadio through something called The Black Effect, and Tiffany Haddish is the executive producer, the co-executive producer of my TV show. That's me with a guy named Jason Lee. That's me with Charlemagne the God. I got invited to the Barbie premiere, and I'm sitting with Billie Eilish, hanging out with Jimmy Kimmel and Will Smith. Now, I don't show you any of that to show off or brag. The reason I'm showing you that is because solution focused brief therapy is having a moment, and people in really high positions and positions of influence are getting really interested in this approach. For example, I got invited to meet Will Smith because he had heard about my work in the solution focused world, and he had reached out to my production team and said he wanted to meet me. So they reached out to me and said, "Are you willing to go to the set of this movie he was filming?" The movie was called Bad Boys 4. And I ended up going and watching a whole day of shooting, which was a really cool experience. Also a bit boring. When you sit around a movie set, you literally do nothing for a whole day. And I just sat around watching them take about 200 takes of this one scene. And then at the end of the day, they invited me to his trailer where we had like a 45-minute conversation about solution focused brief therapy. So I just wanted you to see where this approach is going so that you could know you're learning something that not only is evidence-based and supported by research, but also is becoming kind of the go-to approach. Like people are starting to reach out and ask for this. Now, I'm old enough to remember when one of the most popular approaches, something called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which I'm sure all of you heard about, CBT was having that happen in the early 2000s, where Dr. Phil had become very prominent and people were learning about cognitive behavioral therapy and reaching out for it. Well, excuse me, well, that's what is happening now. Solution focused brief therapy is having a bit of a moment. So all of you that are here, you're here at a good time because you're learning this approach at a time which is becoming very prominent, very popular. Now, I've been doing this work for a really long time, and I want to share with you my new ideas in this approach, like things that are part of where we are evolving to and what we are doing. And first of all, and look, some of what I'm going to say is going to be surprising to you, but we have spent a lot of time working on these ideas, and it's really, really important. The first thing is it's not our job to solve problems. Our job is to help achieve healing, and they're not the same thing. Okay, that's really, really important. I want to say that again. A client is going to come to you with a problem, and just for the sake of this example, let's say that problem is over drinking. It is not your job to reduce their drinking. They have to do that on their own. It's their job to reduce their drinking. Your job is to help them to heal from whatever it is that causes them to overdrink. That makes sense? And in their healing, they will choose to not drink. Now, that's a mind shift thing. That's an important thing. So, did you guys follow that? Can you let me know in the chat? Do you understand what I'm saying? I think sometimes as therapists, we get into this mindset. The client comes to therapy and they are drinking too much or whatever the problem might be. And then we think, all right, how do we come up with strategies to help them not drink? But here's the really important thing. Do you guys know how do you know how long it takes a clinician to begin to experience significant symptoms of burnout in this field? Does anybody know the answer to this question? I know I just threw two questions at you. Are you following what I'm saying? Number one. And then number two, do you know how long it takes a clinician in our field to start experiencing significant symptoms of burnout? Anybody there?
Yes.
Oh,
Let's see. Sorry. Let me try and open up this questions tab. My goodness.
I got a little nervous. There's a
No.
thunderstorm going on.
No, it was just like, well, because in the background, I don't want my background to be impacting your presentation. So we've got a ton of yes, that's good. Love it. Healing is the target. That sounds
Good,
also very person-centered, which I thought is a really great feedback. Thank you. You're on the spot.
good.
So
That
ton
makes me
ton
happy.
of great feedback.
Well, it makes me happy because if you can understand this one premise, then not only are you in a position to be a better clinician, regardless of whatever approach it is you're using, but solution focused brief therapy builds from here. It is not my job to solve problems. And so, how about this? How long does it take clinicians to start experiencing significant symptoms of burnout? Does anybody know?
So we have a couple of 1 year, 2 years, 6 months.
8 months is the answer. 8 months. So imagine you paid a ton of money to get your bachelor's degree, then you paid a ton of money to get a master's degree. Some of you went on, paid even more money to get a doctorate degree, and you enter in this field with enthusiasm and excitement to help people. And within 8 months, you feel like you made the wrong choice and you want to go into a different field. You want to leave this field. And the reason that happens is we inherently know that you can't solve anybody else's problems. We know that in our parenting, we know that in our job, we know that in life. But in therapy, we think it's our responsibility to solve a problem. So a client comes to therapy and they drink too much and they say, oh man, I drink and I get in trouble. And then we start coming up with strategies to help them not drink. And inevitably, they continue to drink, which we experience as a personal failure and thus leads to burnout and frustration. How many of you guys have ever worked really hard with a client and you know that you've given them ideas that will make a difference? If you just did the things that we talked about, I know I've given you ideas that will be helpful to you. The client does not act upon them and then their problem persists. How many of you guys feel frustrated with that experience?
So many times.
Which, which by the way, I'm raising my hand too. Like
Yeah.
I'm not separating myself from these ideologies. Like, so what shifted for me is when I realized my responsibility actually isn't to the drinking. My responsibility is something happened in that person's life. No one, and I mean no one, when they're growing up and you ask a young kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? No one says an alcoholic, a drug addict, a criminal, a depressive person. Like no one says that. Something in their history happened and rerouted their life towards the problem that brought them into your office now. So our job is to help them heal from that thing. And if you can understand that and fight the urge to solve problems and stick to the what we're actually here to do, which is to help achieve healing, then you can build your career from there. And this is related to or connected to we have to inspire our clients to achieve their desired changes. If you were to ask me, how do I say that? If you were to ask me, like, Elliot, here's a new client you're going to see. This client has all kinds of problems. You can only do one of two things. You can fix them or inspire them. Which one would you choose? 100 out of 100 times, I would choose to inspire them. And the reason that that would be my choice is because an inspired person can do anything. And as I've said previously, it's not my job to fix them. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even say I believe they are broken. So we have to stop viewing people as if they're broken or shattered and start realizing that our job is to inspire people because once a person is inspired, they're capable of achieving absolutely anything. And practicing solution focused brief therapy is not just good for our clients, it's good for you as well. Now, the reason that I say that is when you spend your career talking to people about problems and over focused on problems, it is actually difficult for you. We experience something called secondary trauma. So if someone sits in your office and they tell you about their horrible traumas and their horrible histories and all the difficult things that have happened to and around them, we can't help it. We take that on. And by the way, did you guys know that because you're a clinician, that kind of tells that you have an increased ability for empathy? Does anybody know that? Psychotherapists have a higher level of empathy than the average person walking around on the street. And empathy is that ability to take on other people's stuff. How many of you, like, let me know in the chat, how many of you feel like a sponge to other people's emotions and energies? Like you can't really even help it. You just take it on. That is because you score really high in empathy levels. So what happens to therapists? Well, actually, I should give you guys a chance to answer. How are they doing? Are they answering?
Yes, we are empaths. It's a hazard of the job. Yes, I do. Yes, 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 pretty much all the time.
That's right. It's actually not it's not really a hazard of the job. It's actually how you got the job. Like you couldn't do this job if you didn't score high on empathy levels, right? So you've got to score really high on empathy levels in order to do the connective work that we do. But there is like a consequence for that. And the consequence for that is when someone comes into your office and they tell you how horrible life has been, they tell you how horrible their problems are, and they tell you how difficult everything is, you take that on and you can't help it. Well, with solution focused brief therapy, there's actually something called secondary resilience. So when your clients come in and they tell you their hero story, they tell you about their strengths and resources, and they tell you about their hopes, dreams, and wishes, you take that on too. And it becomes healthy for you mentally to practice in this way. Does that make sense? Did you just follow that?
A bunch of yeses, thumbs up.
Perfect. Okay. So the newest idea that has been developed in solution focused brief therapy in the past 20 years is myself and my colleague Dr. Adam Frower created something called the solution focused brief therapy diamond, and it looks like this. Now, if you've been following my work at all, you've heard of the solution focused diamond, and I know I'm hitting you with a ton of stuff really fast. I'm going to make sure that you get this PowerPoint. You can email it out to them. I'll send it to you or my assistant will send it to you after the training.
Awesome.
But that's this diagram you see here. Now, this diagram might look really simple, but it took Dr. Frower and I 10 years to develop this. We spent years and years and years looking at therapy under a microscope and analyzing what are clinicians doing and how are they doing it. And at that time, Adam and I were very, very interested. I'm talking all the way back in 2008. We're very interested in what does a solution focused brief therapy doing in session. And to our dismay, no one could tell us. They could only answer us in two ways. And all we wanted to know is, what do we do in a therapy session? And they would tell us, one, what we weren't doing, right? So what does a solution focused brief therapist do in session? Well, they don't focus on problems. Awesome. But what do they do? Or number two, they would talk to us in theoretical terms. Like we focus on the client's strengths. Okay, but how do you do that linguistically? Or how do you do that when the client has trauma, when the client has a hard time letting go of their pain and or problem? Like, how do you actually do it? How many of you guys have ever been frustrated that all we learn was theory and we don't learn the actual practice, the actual skill of therapy?
Maybe repeat that one more time. We've got one. It says, yes, that was a frustration of mine also.
Yeah, like
Definitely learned the actual skills.
we don't learn skills in graduate school, even though like we have a class called like, clinical skills. We don't learn actual skills in graduate school. What we learn in graduate school is the theories. And by the way, I'm not here to criticize necessarily, but I am here to say we need the skills in order to make a difference in clients' lives. Like that's actually something that we need to be able to do. Like we have to perform the task of being a clinician, but we learn theory. And Adam and I, we didn't know. So how do you actually practice solution focus? So we got really nerdy. We got really hyper focused and we started watching hundreds. I mean, I'm talking, we started watching lots and lots of therapy, excuse me, being done by some of the most well-known solution focused brief therapists at the time. We wanted to see what was happening in the section. And what we learned was number one, all solution focused brief therapists contain three phases, or all solution focused brief therapy sessions contain three phases. The first step is a focus on desired outcome. The second step is on description. And the third step is closing. So that's what we have to do in all sessions is a conversation about the desired outcome that features a detailed description of that desired outcome and then a closing. And then we realized that there are three ways to do this thing of description, which is actually the most important skill in solution focused brief therapy. And then a way that we wrap up sessions. Now, solution focused brief therapy, it's a very questions based process. And I said earlier, the very controversial statement that we have to know how to use this approach regardless of the client problem. Now, I'm not saying that the client problem is irrelevant. I am saying the client problem is irrelevant to the process of change. So, for example, when the client comes to therapy, and I've been using the example of somebody that's drinking, so I'll just keep using that. Or you know what? No. Let's talk about depression. When a client comes to therapy and they're struggling with depression, in traditional approaches, we do this assessment and try to figure out like what's wrong with them, right? Like what the depression is and what like all of the things. In this approach, regardless of the problem that is bothering the client, we're going to ask them what is their desired outcome from the therapy, a process we call best hopes. So, the most common way that therapy is initiated in a solution focused conversation in a first session is by asking, what are your best hopes from therapy? And we would ask that to any client, regardless of the problem that came to them, because that desired outcome is actually what drives the therapy. Does that make sense? You guys follow that? We've got to know what is the outcome the client wants to achieve. In essence, where is the session going? A good comparative a good comp. What's the word I'm trying to find? Something to compare that to is when you get into a cab. I travel a lot, and oftentimes I land in, whatever airport. I land at, JFK Airport in New York, and I get my luggage and I walk out, and there's this big area where all the taxi cabs are, and you get in line, and the person at the airport tells you there's your cab right there, and you get in the cab, and what does the cab driver do? He turns to you and he says, "Where to?" Right? He says, "Where to?" And then I give him the answer. Oh, I'm staying at such and such a hotel, such area, whatever. The cab driver can't take me where I'm going unless he asks me where I'm going. The cab driver doesn't say, how, like, where did you come from? Because that doesn't help them. The cab driver doesn't say, where have you been? Because that doesn't help them. The cab driver doesn't say, how long did it take you to get here? Because that doesn't help them. The cab driver asks me the single most important question, which is where to? Solution focused brief therapy is a where to approach. So, regardless of what issue the client might have, we're going to ask them where to. Where would you like this session to go? Now, why that's so incredibly powerful is because from the moment we meet them, we're engaging with them in a conversation where hope is now the centerpiece of the conversation. And hope is incredibly powerful and incredibly transformational. Now, we realized after years of study that there are three different ways to do a description, something we call history of the outcome. Now, a lot of people misunderstand solution focused brief therapy and they describe it as a future focused approach. And that's not true. A future focus is a part of solution focused brief therapy, but it is not to the exclusion. We oftentimes talk to our clients about their history, and that should make sense because the history is where the client has evidence of their own greatness and their own ability to achieve their outcomes. So we often ask people about their past, but we ask them about their past experience with the best version of themselves instead of asking about their past experience with a particular problem or symptom. We also do something called a resource for the outcome description, where in those cases, whatever the outcome the client that they want to achieve is, so let's say a depressed person comes to therapy, what do you best so far on talking? I want to be happy. Then we ask them about the resources they have within them that makes the opportunity to become happy realistic. And then lastly, a description about the future. Most people are aware of this. How many of you guys have ever heard of a thing called the miracle question? Most people who are even minimally aware of what solution focused brief therapy is have heard about the miracle question. How many of you out there have heard about the miracle question? Anyone? Anyone?
Yes, I have used it often, and yes from you.
Perfect. Yeah, the miracle question, like suppose you went to sleep one night and a miracle happened that solved all of your problems, even though we ask it a little bit differently these days. When you woke up the next day, what would you notice? The miracle question is a question about the future. If you want to have an impact on someone's life, and this is true clinically and not, you have to talk to people about a future that has not yet happened, wherein you help them describe the future in a way that they would be pleased with. Some parts of the world call that manifestation. Other parts of the world call that, in our case, the miracle question. But having a conversation about the future is incredibly powerful. And these are the three different ways in which we do a description. And then lastly, a closing. A solution focused therapy session ends very differently than other psychotherapy sessions. Most psychotherapy, again, it's about solving a problem, even though it shouldn't be. It's got to be about healing. If you don't remember anything I say today, I want you to remember me saying that. It's got to be about healing. Well, we don't end by saying, do this task, do this homework, whatever. We typically end therapy sessions by asking clients to notice evidence of change. Now, really quickly, I want to tell you why that's so important. Change happens most consistently when you are paying attention to change. So the most powerful thing you can ask somebody to do is pay attention to the evidence that change is happening. Okay? Whew, man, we're going super fast. All right, we're almost to the questions. All right, so SFBT questions, I want you to understand this is a questions-based process. So your job is to ask questions and get good at that process. Now, these are not even questions that have to be answered out loud. Now, Talk therapy, of course, it is much easier when the client participates and answers the questions out loud. But the beautiful thing about questions is they make you think, right? They make you process things. So the questions can do their work just as well if the user just thinks quietly about the question and reflects on his or her answers. Questions in this approach need to be thought of as invitations, and thus the normal rules of inviting apply. What I mean by that is every single question is an invitation for the client to participate in a conversation. Like each of you, if I were to ask you, let me see, for each of you, if I were to ask you, what is your favorite baseball team? You might be like, "Ooh, I'm excited to talk about baseball," and just go ahead and answer. My favorite baseball team is the New York Yankees. Or if I were to ask you what's your favorite baseball team, and you might say, I'm not a baseball fan, and thus not want to engage in that conversation. We have to understand that all of the questions we ask people give them opportunities to engage in that topic, and the client has every right to accept, reject, or modify each and every invitation. I'm not trying to get the client to do anything. I'm simply there to ask them questions. The moment I try to get them to do something, then I'm no longer really participating in a relationship. I'm using force and oppression. And this is very, very important that we understand the client has the right to participate at whatever level they would like to. The moment I try to get the client to do anything, either in the therapy or in their lives, the moment I start trying to tell them what to do, the rules of oppression start to apply, and that hurts clinical outcomes. There's actually a lot of research about this. Now, principles of solution focused work. Every single client comes from a successful past. I need you to really buy into and understand this. Now, that's not to say every single client is successful in life all the time, but what it is to say is there is an example of success in every single person's life. Maybe they overcame some challenges that helped them succeed in high school, or maybe literally just they had problem after problem after problem, and the way they carry the problem is an example of success. But every single person has history of success in their background, and we have to honor that. It's your job to connect with the client. It's your job to make sure that you and the client are on the same page. It's your job to build a relationship with the client, not the client's. If your client is there and they're shut off and they're not paying attention and they're not connected, it is our job to find a way to connect with them. It is not our job to label them as resistant and not wanting to be there and to judge them and criticize them. It's our job to find a way to connect. I want you to direct each question. I told you solution focused brief therapy is a questions based approach, and it's our job to direct each question towards each person present. So, those of you who work with families or couples, I'm not sure why I'm sneezing. It's your job to direct each question towards everyone present. So, those of you who work with families or couples, make sure you engage all of them by giving them the opportunity to answer each and every question. Now, admittedly, some people are going to be way more enthused to answer questions than others, and it's easier to talk to one person in the room versus another, but it is still your job to stay engaged and connected to each person present. And the beauty is in the details. So we are going to do what we always do with beautiful things. We're going to focus on them. Whatever you focus on grows. We know this is true. There's a lot of science about this outside of the clinical world. We know whatever you focus on grows. So if you focus on the problem, what happens? The problem gets bigger. So we want to focus on people's greatness so their greatness gets bigger. And there's a video going super viral on social media. I saw it a few days ago. This young girl, and I don't know, she's probably like 8 years old, and she's at what appears to be like a soccer practice. And she walks up to a soccer ball. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this. And she walks up to a soccer ball and she kicks it. And she does an incredibly poor job of kicking this ball. She kicks it off to the side. The ball does not go, like kind of squibbles a few feet. And she's really disappointed at her very terrible kick. And then she does two backflips to get back in line. And I watched that. And I'm like, oh, that is such a wonderful demonstration of why it's important to focus on beautiful things. Because I could criticize that young girl because you're clearly not a very talented player, at least not at this stage of her life. But she obviously has other skills because she does backflips to get herself back in line with her peers. I think so many of us walk through life with an over focus on our problems and an under focus on what makes us great. What I love most about solution focused brief therapy is we flip that and we begin to focus on what makes people great. And when you do that, the flaws lose at least some of their impact. When you focus on what makes people great, you do a really, really important thing. Like, we all have to acknowledge there's nobody perfect on this planet. So that means everybody has flaws. And I could argue one of the biggest threats to our mental health is we all over focus on our flaws and we begin to judge ourselves based upon the appearance of those flaws. Well, if there's no perfect person on the planet, that means there's no perfectly imperfect person either. That means every person has some strengths, regardless of how flawed they may experience themselves. So, thus, we have to help people shift their focus to their greatness and not their flaws. Now, if you've seen that video that I was just referring to, I really hope that young girl has parents in her life, coaches in her life, people in her life that help her realize it's okay to be bad at soccer because you're clearly good at gymnastics, that sort of thing. And we're going to be very, very careful when we're in conversation with our clients to select which part of their answers we're going to build our questions around. In solution focused brief therapy, our questions comes from the client answers, and we have to be very careful in how we select what the client answers will be that we use in our questions. And when we do this, we're going to use the client's exact language. Now, keys to asking solution-focused brief therapy questions effectively is each question must be about the desired outcome, right? On some level, every single question I ask must be connected to the desired outcome and connected to the client's resources that they could use to make that outcome become a reality. Just ask the next question, not the right question. Very often people struggle to use solution focused brief therapy because they're trying to ask this like profound question that will like change the client's life forever. Excuse me. And what I hope I've illustrated with this diamond is solution focused brief therapy is a process, and it's your job just to ask the next question in the process. And the way to stay sharp is to hone these skills. This is an incredibly important thing that I think our field kind of under emphasizes. Therapy is a craft. It is a skill. And just like with any other craft and just like with any other skill, if you don't use it, you will lose efficacy with it. So it's very, very important that we treat this as a skill and we hone it and we work at it, which is why I'm so glad people like you guys are here. You obviously get that, or you wouldn't have responded to the invitation to come here that you got from therapy sites. Now, there are two simple rules when we're practicing solution focused brief therapy. Number one, it is your job, 100% your responsibility for asking questions that produce useful answers. Again, if the client gives an answer that it is not useful, it's not because they're resistant, it's not because they don't want to be there, it's not because they're bad clients, it's because I haven't found the right question yet. And the good thing is you have infinite opportunities to keep asking questions, but it is your job to find a way to ask the kind of questions that produce useful answers. And the client takes all of the credit for each and every useful answer they give. So this is the single most important slide. So I put it in twice. That's literally why I'm going to give you this PowerPoint, because I want you to have this. Because if you can master this, it can make a massive difference in your ability to apply this approach effectively with your clients. So what makes SFBT different is each and every conversation is different. Going back to what I said earlier, this is not a cookie cutter approach, even though I'm saying it has demonstrated to be effective. And by the way, everything I've said, there's research supporting it. It is demonstrated to be successful and effective. with each and every client group it's ever been researched against. That doesn't mean to say it's a cookie cutter approach, because language is different. Each and every conversation is different because your clients bring a different level of skill and resource into the session. Each and every conversation is different, and it builds on what the client wants using their resources. The focus is on the details of change, not the problem. Thus, it is not a cookie cutter approach. It's tailored to each and every client. In fact, it's the opposite of cookie cutter approach because it's ultra tailored to meet the needs of each and every question or each and every client. Got it? Whoa, all right. About to take your question for the next 13 minutes. But
Oh, all right.
before I do, I've got a quick question for you guys. Now, every single time I do this, someone will inevitably email me and say, like, where can I get more training on this? So is there anybody out there that would be interested in more deeper training than just what you could get in an hour? If there's not, I don't want to waste your time, but if there is, I want to be able to give you an opportunity to do that, because every single time I do this, people ask me, where can I get more training?
We have a ton of yeses coming in.
All right, so here's what I'm going to do, and this is completely special to the Therapy Sites audience because I love and appreciate that Therapy Sites asked me to do this. So I'm going to make a training available to you guys. We have a Diamond Mastery course that's available on my website where it breaks down each step of the diamond, the desired outcome, resource for the outcome, preferred future description, every point you saw on the diamond. There's a series of training videos related to those, so you can really master this. Let me see. So there's a roadmap for the SFBT session, and then you have a training about outcomes, a training about resources, a training about follow-up sessions, a training about developing a solution-focused mindset, a training about history for the outcome, a training about preferred future. Comes with 18 CEUs. I've also thrown in a bonus, again, just because I love the Therapy Sites audience. And I did a video series that was a bunch of case studies because I felt like the best way for you to become confident in solution focused brief therapy is if you could learn from case studies that were challenging. Like, I always hated when I would go to a presentation and the therapist would only show like the easiest clients to work with. And I wanted to do the exact opposite. So I put together a case study series that I called 10 scenarios when SFBT should not have worked, but it did. And in each of those case studies, I talked to you about like the real work, like working with a client where it was really, really challenging, the kind of thing you wouldn't imagine that something like solution focused brief therapy would be effective with, but then it did make a massive difference. And this is available on my website. The entire training on my website, each component on my website is for $197. But if you sign up during this webinar, which is in the next 10 minutes, I'll let you have the whole package for $197. So there's the link at the top of the page, which is probably too much for you to type out. So I added the coupon code there. And ma'am, if you could share that link with everybody in the chat, so you could also just click on it. Again, this ridiculously special price is only available for the next 10 minutes while we're on this webinar. And I would do that because I love you guys and I love your work and I love Therapy Sites, and I want to make sure I give the best opportunity for you guys to get trained to do this work. You deserve to be skilled, you deserve to be confident, and more importantly, your clients deserve for you to be at your most skilled and most confident. So I'm going to make this available for the next 10 minutes, and I'm going to take some questions here live. But before I do, so did you go ahead and share that link?
I did. Yep. I've thrown it in the
Okay.
chat twice just in case. Yep.
And before I do, I'm going to turn it over to Therapy Sites
Thank
because
you.
they have a message too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Every time I listen to you speak, you just give such a great, passionate presentation. So thank you so much for sharing, the valuable
No
information that you
problem.
did with
Thank you.
our attendees today. I think that, they appreciate it. I appreciate it. So thank you so much for participating in this event. And I'm Andrea. I'm the sales manager with Therapy Sites. And at Therapy Sites, we work with mental health professionals, much like yourselves, to help them create a professional looking website and ensure they can be found online where and when their clients are searching in order to help increase new client acquisition. We encourage the practices we work with to build a website that's a reflection of themselves, but also help them create a marketing strategy that allows them to achieve their goals. Our solutions make it easy to schedule appointments online, create a network of referrals via social media, and even the ability to interact with clients from virtually anywhere via our telehealth platform. As a special thank you for being here today, we are extending a special webinar offer where you will pay $39 a month in website hosting for your first 12 months, normally $69 a month. We also have a poll, so if you'd like to have us contact you to learn more about therapy sites and how we can help attract more new clients to your practice, you can also send us a quick email at webinar@therapysites.com, or you can call us at 866-255-8745. I also shared that in the chat. But feel free to provide us your feedback about our event today via our post-webinar survey we'll be sending out. We really appreciate you taking the time to participate in our webinar event. We do have a handful of questions, so I want to make sure we've got a few minutes to tackle those before Elliot has to end the session. So let me just pop back into the questions so we can touch on those as well. So let me go back to the top here. So first question that came in, what if a client's best hope includes, I just want someone to talk to and vent?
But there's no, there would be no such thing. Like they only want someone to talk to and invent to achieve an outcome. So if
Right.
someone said, I just want somebody to talk to and vent, I would say, and let's imagine that I became that person you could talk to and vent to. What would you notice that would let you know talking to me and venting to me made a difference in your life? So that's what I
Exactly.
mean when I say solution focused brief therapy is a shift to a focus on an outcome, and that outcome is what manifests itself as a consequence of that. So if someone says, I just need to vent to somebody, I just need somebody to talk to what aim? I always want you thinking to what aim when you're working with
Right.
clients.
Right. We talked at the very beginning of the session in regards to burnout. What do you have suggestion-wise in order to reduce burnout?
So this is going to sound stupid, but I practice I practice solution focused brief therapy to prevent burnout. I have a history of trauma. Like there was some significant childhood traumas that happened in my life. And I remember going to graduate school and learning about all these theories. And I couldn't imagine talking to people about problems for the rest of my career. I really was like, man, I can't even imagine just sitting around talking about problems all day because I didn't want anybody doing that to me. So I couldn't imagine doing that to someone else. I didn't know about solution focused brief therapy, but once I heard about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I get to talk to people about hope. Yes, sign me up. I'm in. Let me do that. So I think in our field, we focus on the prevention of burnout with something we call self-care.
Okay.
But I think the first way to achieve self-care is to do this job in a way that's congruent to who you are and how you want to show up. And I want to show up in people's lives as a hopeful, inspiring, loving person. And the only approach that allowed me to do that clinically was solution focused brief therapy. So the reason I said like it's gonna sound stupid is because like I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to convince you guys to do this, but I'm
Right.
just being honest. That's why I do it. Like I get up every day and I can't believe I get to practice this approach. I can't believe I get to talk to people about this approach. I can't believe I get to work with organizations like therapy sites who train this approach. Like I'm
Yeah.
genuinely in awe and blown away that I get to do it. So have a job and have a role in the way that you do that job that like fulfills you. And then you don't
Right.
need self-care. I tell people all the time, like my goal when I entered into this field was I wanted to build a life I didn't need a vacation from. And I've always thought it was weird. People have a job and they're like, oh, I can't wait until insert date so I can take time off. And I was like, but your job is the thing you do like the majority of your day.
Right.
Like you spend so much of your week doing that job. If you're looking forward to when it's over so you can go away for a week or two, maybe that's a bad fit. So that's what I would say is my answer.
Gotcha. Okay. That's fair enough. Um, how do I get better at asking questions? There was a couple of different comments and feedback along the way that was just talking about how can I get better at questions? How can I improve, my skills at questions? Like there was a number of different things. So I thought I would just, kind of group those together.
Well, the easiest answer to that is you have to get trained. And quite honestly, that's why I put this training together. That's why it's available on my website. I'm obsessed with helping people get good at the art of therapy. In fact, my first book is called The Art of Solution Focused Therapy. So I am obsessed with helping people get good at the art of therapy. And that art in a solution focused context is the art of asking questions. So we didn't learn this in
Hmm.
graduate school. And I don't mean solution focused, but like we didn't learn the
Right.
linguistics that are necessary to do therapy because what we learned was theory and we took the linguistics for granted. So so sign up for this training. Like this is going to give you the think of a dictionary. If you're going to be successful in therapy, you need like a dictionary of questions to master the language. If I told you your job requires you to learn French,
Hmm.
like you're going to be fired unless you learn French. The first thing you would do is you go buy a English to French dictionary so you can practice the language and get good and ultimately become fluent in French. Well, I'm telling you, the language of solution focused brief therapy is the language of questions. So now you have to get the problem to questions book. And
Right.
that's what this training is. That's what training is all about. And every time I talk about this stuff, people ask me that question, like, Ellie, where can I get more stuff to get good at this art? Because that seems to be the way I want to practice, which is why I make an offer like this. And I love you guys, like genuinely. I think therapists, like the work we do is so hard and so difficult, like, and so challenging.
Yeah.
I think and also we don't get paid a whole lot. And I look around this field and I see people that have trainings available for $5,000, like crazy amounts. So I want to make it as easy for you to get as possible, less than 200 bucks, 18 credits, and I
Yeah.
promise the outcome in your confidence in your clinical work will be huge.
Right. The last question I think we have time for, because we're just about at the top of the hour, was how do I transition the way that I run my practice today to be more solution focused? Is
Oh
there,
my gosh. Okay. That's a great question. So my original here's how I answer that question whenever anybody asks me. My original training in this field, which by the way, click on the link. Can you put the link in the chat again? Like click on the
yep,
link
I
that
just
you
did.
guys
Uh-huh.
remember, use a QR code. If you when the webinar ends, excuse me, when the webinar ends, so does this offer. And the only way you'll be able to get this package is on my website, and it's 197 per module. And today you get 197 for the whole package. Now, the way I answer that question, my original training in this field was cognitive behavioral therapy. Um, so when I went to my internship at the end of or towards the end of my master's degree, I was made to practice cognitive behavioral therapy, and I didn't know there were like I had options, so that I just did what I was told to do.
Hmm.
And then I started going deeper into solution focused brief therapy, and I had a bunch of clients in that internship. I'll never forget. I had 27 clients. And the more I learned about solution focused brief therapy, the more I wanted that to be the way that I practiced. So I decided to go to all 27 of those clients. And this is literally what I said. I said, I've recently been engaged in some therapy training that is probably going to impact the way I show up in these sessions. You're probably going to experience me a little bit differently because I've been to this training and I'm going to start doing my job slightly different. Is that okay? 100% of those 27 people said, yep, it's totally fine. And then some of them, most of them, at the end of the session, they all said, oh, I didn't really notice a change. And what I realized was clients don't care what we're doing at all. They just want to achieve the outcome that they're going to get from therapy. So, how do you make that shift? That's exactly how I did it. And I've never looked back. That was almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And I've always been doing this ever since. So just tell people, like I've been to a training, I'm starting to focus on some other things in my clinical work. You might experience me as a little bit differently than you're used to. Is that okay? And I promise you, they're going to say yes. And then go about practicing this art and this skill. And find more training. Like, go to my website. I've got tons of trainings there. I've got a certification course there. Like, my organization, we're the leading training organization in the world. We literally train 10,000 therapists a month via our trainings. Most of our trainings are free. The deeper level trainings like this one cost a little bit of money, and it costs way less money today than it would any other time. So take advantage of these opportunities and start building your skill, because it's going to make a massive difference in your life, in your work, in your clients' lives as well.
Thank you so much, honestly. I know we're at the top of the hour, so everybody, thank you for sticking on a couple of extra minutes. I did post a link to Elliot's website as well as his courses. And I did also post contact information for therapy sites as well if you're looking for additional information from our side of things. So everybody have a great rest of the afternoon. Elliot, thank you so much. I appreciate your
Thank you,
time and
everybody.
effort.
Love you all so
Thank you
much.
for
I appreciate
attending.
it.
Have a great rest of the week, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, bye, everybody.